Well, hello, boys and girls. How are you today? Are you having a great day? All right. Well, this is Mr. Broussard. Of course, I'm sure you recognize my face after all these months. And we are here to do another science lesson. And since we have, we've talked about this in previous lessons, but since we have benchmark assessments coming up, and in a couple of months, we'll have also the state test coming up. We want to make sure that we do some reviews, okay? We want to make sure that that knowledge that we learned, well, first of all, we want to make sure that we remember it. And number two, we want to make sure that we know how to use that information to answer the types of questions that we will see on the tests, okay? So, we are going to go back. This week, we're going all the way back to the beginning of the year, quite a few months ago, and we are going to be reviewing in this lesson the standards that deal with ecosystems, okay? Ecosystems, producers, consumers, decomposers, and their role in the ecosystem, all right? Let's look at the learning target so that we are clear about what we are doing during this lesson, okay? So the learning target is, I can use existing knowledge, okay, so knowledge that is already there in our brains, about producers, consumers, and decomposers and their role in an ecosystem to answer multiple choice questions. So not just to write definitions down or not just to do short answers, but to actually think about different choices and answer those questions that will be the type of questions that we will see on the benchmark, okay? So let's get started. Before we start with some of those questions, I'd like you to watch a video, okay, to just sort of refresh your memory about ecosystem. What is an ecosystem? Because the first two questions that we're going to review today have to do with ecosystems. I'm sure that many of you know it, and you don't have to review it, but just in case, let's watch this video about ecosystem. Let me tell you the title of the link. Either you will open it yourselves or your teacher will do it for you. So that's the link, is ecosystems video, okay? So as you watch the video, okay, make sure that you are understanding what an ecosystem is, okay? That's the main part, so that then you're able to answer the questions that I have for you after. So ecosystems, okay? Even if you remember, just watch the video. It will be a good review. So you remember now what an ecosystem is? All right, let's share with the rest of the class. Maybe two or three of you. What is an ecosystem? Right, time to share. What is an ecosystem? So according to the video, an ecosystem is an environment where living and non-living things interact. Living and non-living things interact. So water is non-living, but the living things interact with the water. Rocks are non-living, but animals and plants interact with the rocks. So living and non-living things interact with each other. So it's an area where living and non-living things interact with each other. So let's look at the first question. An ecosystem can support many different organisms. How is this possible? So remember, when we have these questions, we want to make sure that we completely understand what the question is asking us to think about, okay? So we have to read it 2 or 3 times. So let's read it a second time. An ecosystem can support many different organisms. How is this possible? So how can that area support a bunch of many different living things, organisms? How is that possible? So remember what I told you in the last few lessons. You have to sort of imagine, okay? Imagine, create a mental movie of what the question is asking you. So an ecosystem can support many different organisms. Okay, ecosystem. So think of an ecosystem. Think of a pond. Okay, there are fish, there are turtles, there are flies around there. There could be an otter. How can that ecosystem support all of those different things? Okay, different, not things, different organisms, different living things. Let's look at our choices. So choice A, organisms occupy different niches in an ecosystem. Organisms compete for resources in an ecosystem. True, they compete. Organisms have no relationships in an ecosystem. Well, we know that that is not true because we know that they are all interrelated. D, organisms have to have individual ecosystems. No, because we know that more than one living thing lives in one ecosystem. So we know that they compete. It is true that they compete, but let's look at the question. An ecosystem can support many different things. How is this possible? Well, it is not through competition. So we already eliminated 3. Let's look at A. Organisms occupy different niches in an organism. So they occupy different little parts in an organism. The fish will eat maybe some plants at the bottom of the pond. And the otter might eat bigger fish. And the turtle will eat some of the leaves that are around the pond. So, because they are using different resources in that ecosystem, they can all survive. So the choice would be, the correct choice will be, it's A. So organisms occupy different niches in an ecosystem. Okay? So you see, by reading carefully, reading a couple of times, maybe 3 times, creating a mental movie in your head, and then using that knowledge that you already have there, you can answer the questions correctly. No doubt about it. Let's look at another question. Right? So where in an ecosystem will the largest amount of earthworms be found? All right? Let's read it one more time. So where in an ecosystem will the largest amount of earthworms be found? So now you think in your head, create that mental picture. So think earthworm. So have that image in your head. What does an earthworm look like? Where do they live? Okay, and even if you didn't know the word, even if you don't know what an earthworm is, you can think, oh, earth. I know earth, I know worm, so it must be some sort of worm that lives in the earth, right? And we already know that in an ecosystem, we have a bunch of different organisms living there and interacting with each other. So where would we find an earthworm? Well, let's see our choices. A, inside the bark of the trees. Well, if it's an earthworm, a bark of a tree is not earth. Inside the flowering plants. Well, we would find other organisms there like bees or butterflies, but not worms. Mixed in the rocks of the stream. Well, that would mean that they can live in the water. Let's see. Mixed in the decaying leaves and soil. Do you know the word decaying? When something is decaying, it's been decomposed. But even if you didn't know that word, just the fact that it says soil, that would be it. So the key word here is soil. Earthworms live in the soil. There is the right choice. D. Are you ready for another question? All right, let's look at this one. So eagles and owls both eat frogs. Which statement best describes how eagles and owl populations can both survive in the same ecosystem? Remember, we got to read it a couple of times, so let's make sure that we understand what the question is asking. Let's read it a second time. Eagles and owls both eat frogs. Which statement best describes how eagle and owl populations can both survive in the same ecosystem? Okay? So I'm sure that most of you know what an owl and what an eagle is, but there might be some English learners out there that do not know those words. So you just got to know that those two animals, those two living things, eat the same thing. What do they eat? They eat frogs. So they both eat frogs. How can they make it in the same ecosystem if they both eat the same thing? Let's look at our choices. So both eagles and owls are also plant eaters. Eagles and owls inhabit different niches. Both eagles and owls eat at the same time of the day. Eagles and owls compete with each other. So which one makes the most sense here? Well, we know that they don't eat at the same time of the day because eagles are hunting during the day and owls at night. So they're not competing with each other. And they're not plant eaters. So this second choice is the one that makes sense. Eagles and owls inhabit different niches. So they have a different area of the ecosystem, a different time of the ecosystem, right? So eagles can hunt during the day and owls during the night. So they don't really have to compete with each other. So this choice is the one that makes the most sense. Okay, before we go into the next question, I want you to watch a short video because these next two questions have to do with producers, consumers, decomposers, okay? And just in case that you have forgotten, I want you to refresh your memories about this. So let me show you the link of the video that I want you to watch. So it's right there. It's titled Producers, Consumers, and Decomposers video. So you can either click it yourself or your teacher is going to do it for you. So we don't have time to discuss this video, but it was very clear. And you already did many lessons about producers, consumers, and decomposers. So let's go to the first question, okay? So starting with a producer, which food chain is the correct order? So starting with a producer, which food chain is in the correct order? Remember, you got to make sense of that. So we want to make sure, so we are starting with the producer. We got to remember what the producers are. We know that producers are plants, right? And then we want to know which one is in the correct order. So let's look at our choices. Grass. All right, so that's a producer. Grasshopper. All right, so that is a consumer. We got to think, what do grasshoppers eat? So they eat grass. Okay. Frog. So you got to think, what does the frog eat? Okay, well, a frog could eat grasshoppers. Yes. And then a snake. And we know that a snake eats frogs. And eagle. And we know that eagles eat snakes. So this one looks like it could be the right answer, but let's check the other ones. Eagle. Oh, well, we already know that that's not true because eagle is not a producer. Eagle is not a plant. Grasshopper. Oh, already, I don't even have to keep reading. A grasshopper is not a plant. Oh, but there is another one here. Grass, grasshopper, frog, eagle, snake. Does the snake eat the eagle? Or does the eagle eat the snake? All right, so this is what's wrong right here. So we got to go to the first one. Grass, grasshopper, frog, snake, eagle. And that is the correct order of that food chain. Ready for another one? All right, let's try it. Which list contains only herbivores? Which list contains only herbivores? So you got to know what an herbivore is. Herbivores. And we just watched a video. So herbivore would be organisms that only eat plants. They only eat producers. Okay, so let's see. Bear, deer, cow. Well, we know that the cow and the deer eat only grass, but the bear, we don't think so. Let's keep checking. Horse, zebra. Okay, so far so good. Wolf. Wolves do not like plants. Let's look at this one. Lion. Lions do not like plants. They're not herbivores. Zebra. All right. Plant eater, herbivore. Deer. True. Plant eater, herbivore. And cow. Plant eater, herbivore. So the only list that we can choose is this one right here. Zebra, deer, cow. All right. Let's look at another question. All right. So let's look at this one. This is going to be our last question for today. In a food web, what is the role of a consumer? In a food web, what is the role of a consumer? So we know that consumers, do they make their own food? Do they produce their own food? No. Producers do that. So let's see. Consumer. What do consumers do? So they add nutrients to the soil. Who does that? Those are the decomposers. They get energy by eating other organisms. All right, that one looks good, but let's keep reading just in case. They have no role in a food web. Well, we know that is not true. Consumers have a big role in a food web. And the last choice, they make food through photosynthesis. Who is the group that makes food through photosynthesis? Those are the plants, the producers. So the only choice here is they get energy by eating other organisms. That's exactly what consumers do. They get energy by eating other organisms. That is our only choice. All right, boys and girls, so we are not going to review anymore for today. You're going to have to wait until next lesson for more questions, getting us ready for our assessments, okay? So thank you so much. I hope that you have a great rest of the day. And remember to look for science. It is everywhere. I will see you next time. Bye-bye.